You might not think a 2,000-year-old letter has much to say about modern project management, right? Well, it turns out it has a ton to say. We're going to go behind the scenes of the Bible, not for a deep theological dive, but to see how one of its final chapters is basically a masterclass in leadership, fundraising, and logistics, all in a world without a single bite of technology. I mean, seriously, think about that for a second. The Apostle Paul was essentially running a global nonprofit. He had to raise funds, coordinate travel for his team, and manage all these different communities. And he had to do it all without email, Slack, Zoom, or even a telephone. His only tool, handwritten letters carried over treacherous roads and seas. So this is a story of how he actually pulled it off. All right, so part one. Paul kicks off this final chapter by getting right down to business. He's tackling a huge initiative he was promoting, a massive fundraising campaign. He just jumps right in, saying, now about the collection. So let's break down what this whole project was about. So what was the project? Well, the Christian community way back in Jerusalem was in big trouble. They were facing severe economic hardship, maybe even a famine. Paul's plan was to collect money from all the newer, non-Jewish churches that he'd founded and deliver it as aid. And listen, this wasn't just passing the hat on a Sunday. This was a massive logistical and financial undertaking. But here's the thing, this collection was about so much more than just the money. For Paul, it was deeply, deeply symbolic. First, it was a way for these new, non-Jewish or Gentile churches to kind of tip their hat to their spiritual roots in Jerusalem. Second, it was real, tangible proof that their faith wasn't just talk. It produced actual roll-up-your-sleeves generosity. And maybe most important of all, it was this powerful gesture of unity, an olive branch meant to heal some pretty serious tensions that were growing between different factions of the early church. So how did he organize this whole thing? With a brilliantly simple 4-step plan. He's like, okay, here's what you do. 1, set aside money regularly every week. 2, give in proportion to your income what you can actually afford. 3, save it all up so there's no frantic last-minute fundraising when I finally show up. And 4, and this is key, you get to appoint your own people to deliver it. See? This isn't just a vague plea, it's a structured, common-sense project plan. Now, what's really fascinating here is how Paul's method is so different from the traditional tithe you might have heard of. The tithe in the Old Testament was essentially a required 10% tax in ancient Israel. But Paul? He completely scraps that model. Instead, he asks people to give voluntarily based on what they can afford. There's no fixed percentage, no guilt trips, and zero manipulation. It's just a pure offering based on generosity. And this leads to what I think is a truly brilliant move in leadership. Paul tells the Corinthians, hey, you guys appoint your own messengers to carry the money to Jerusalem. He deliberately takes himself out of the chain of custody. Why? To protect the project and his own reputation from any hint of financial scandal or suspicion. I mean, 2,000 years ago, this was a masterstroke of financial transparency and accountability. It's genius. Okay, so the project's funded. Great. But it's not just about money, is it? It's about people. And that brings us to the next big challenge, the pure, on-the-ground logistics of how these early missionaries actually lived and traveled to get all this work done. You have to understand, their lifestyle was what we'd call itinerant. That just means they were constantly on the move. These folks didn't have a home base or a fixed salary. They were entirely dependent on the hospitality of the communities they were visiting for absolutely everything: food, a place to sleep, and financial support. It was very much a real-time, on-the-job support system. Now, a key phrase you'll see pop up in these letters is "send me on my way." This wasn't just a friendly "see you later." It was a technical term back then. It meant outfitting a traveler for the next leg of their journey, giving them funds, food, and supplies to get to their next destination. It shows you that the local community wasn't just a passive audience. They were expected to be an active partner in the whole mission. So you've got a team of people who are constantly traveling, totally relying on others for support. You can imagine that brings us to the very real human resources challenges Paul had to deal with. He was managing different personalities, each with their own strengths and, their weaknesses. First up, let's meet Timothy. Now, Timothy was one of Paul's most trusted colleagues, his right-hand man, but he seems to have been young and maybe a little timid. And Paul knows that the Corinthian church can be, well, an intimidating crowd. So he actually writes ahead to protect Timothy, basically saying, hey, when this kid shows up, go easy on him. Don't give him a hard time. And then there's Apollos. He was another respected leader, a brilliant speaker, but clearly a very different personality. Paul says he strongly urged Apollos to visit Corinth. He really pushed him to go. And Apollos' response? He flat out said no. He was like, nope, not ready to go yet. I mean, can you imagine saying, not now, thanks, to the Apostle Paul? But Apollos did. And this little interaction gives us a powerful insight into Paul's leadership style. Yeah, he pushed for what he wanted, but when a respected colleague pushed back, Paul accepted it. He didn't pull rank or get angry. It's a fantastic lesson that even the most influential leaders need to respect the autonomy of their team members. Finally, we get to the very end of the letter. This is where Paul wraps up all the business and logistics and offers his final, very personal sign-off. And let me tell you, it is full of surprises. It's important to note that most of this long, complex letter was likely dictated to a professional scribe, what was then called an amanuensis. This was common practice, but some scholars think Paul had to rely on this because his eyesight was badly damaged, maybe from an attack earlier in his life. So he could compose these brilliant thoughts, but the physical act of writing was a real struggle for him. But to prove the letter was genuinely from him, Paul would take the stylus at the very end and add a personal closing in his own handwriting. This was his signature, his way of authenticating the entire document and adding that really important personal touch. And then the tone just shifts on a dime. Out of absolutely nowhere, Paul drops this bombshell, a harsh, severe curse. It's like a splash of ice water, a shocking reminder of the absolute seriousness of his entire message. He's drawing a very hard line in the sand. And then, just as suddenly as that curse arrived, he follows it with a single word in Aramaic, the everyday language of Jesus, Maranatha. It's an ancient prayer of the early church, and it just means, "Come, Lord." And with that one word, the tone flips completely, from severe judgment to profound hope. And this is what makes his closing so powerful. It holds these two opposing ideas in perfect tension. On one hand, a blunt, uncompromising warning, and on the other, a message of deep hope, all capped off by a final line about his love for every single one of them. It's both tough and tender all at once. And that just leaves us with a final thought. We've just walked through lessons in financial transparency, practical logistics, and even managing difficult personalities. So it really makes you wonder, what can these ancient, behind-the-scenes administrative details teach us about how we build our own strong, authentic, and effective organizations today?